This story is about an alien doctor treating a human soldier until the blood burns through his gloves like acid. In the sterile Hume of Medbay 7, aboard the Coalition flagship Ardent Mercy, Dr. Akir of Clan Loret flexed his second pair of eyelids and tightened his grip on the sterilizer wand. The human soldier on the operating table groaned, his breath ragged, his blood saturating the compress over his right thigh. Vitals are stable but dropping. Injury is consistent with shrapnel puncture, mid-femoral artery possibly nicked. Akir reported to his assistant Genta, who hovered nearby with a tray of auto-sealers and regenerative mesh. The human's name, displayed on the floating chart beside the bed, was Staff Sergeant Evan Holt, 32 Earth years old, 2 prior deployments in the Outer Rim, and an alarming amount of caffeine in his bloodstream. The wound wasn't overly dramatic by battlefield standards. The auto-patcher on his uniform had failed, and he had been rushed in directly from the surface of Arco 9, still in full gear. He was conscious, but barely. Evan's eyes fluttered open just long enough to mutter something about chili mac and napalm, before slipping back into a pain-numbed haze. Akir had treated humans before. Their bodies were oddly redundant and their biochemistry unpredictable, but he admired their resilience. He had once watched a human Marine walk half a kilometer with 2 fractured ribs and a collapsed lung just to retrieve his helmet. But this was routine, or so he thought. With meticulous calm, Akir pressed his gloved fingers against the saturated compress. Removing field dressing, prepare clot matrix. He peeled the gauze back, expecting a rush of dark red and perhaps the glint of metal. Instead, the moment the compress was lifted, the blood underneath surged upward like foam under pressure. It bubbled and hissed, thick rivulets splashing across his gloves. Then came the smoke. Akir froze. His upper eyes blinked in disbelief. The outer layer of his gloves crinkled, then liquefied. A second later, the compound dissolved completely, sending searing pain through the sensitive tissue of his hands. The tray clattered to the floor as he stumbled backward. "Get it off!" he shrieked, instinct overriding decades of surgical calm. He scraped his hands against the sterile wall, only smearing the sizzling mess further across his palms. Genta moved fast, grabbing the emergency neutralizer foam and dousing his hands. The foam hissed louder, steam curling in humid bursts from the floor. Evan stirred on the table, groggy. "Something burning?" he mumbled. "Smells like barbecue." The medical bay sealed itself automatically. A red alert blared. "Biohazard detected. Containment protocols engaged," the AI announced. Akir fell into a sitting position, cradling his blistering hands as he trembled. Pain seared his nerves, but it was the fear that shook him harder. Human blood, had eaten through his gloves. What kind of species carries a corrosive agent in their circulatory system? He barely registered when the quarantine shutters snapped into place and the environmental filters switched to lockdown mode. Captain Elena Brooks was at the door within minutes. She wore no armor but moved like she didn't need it. Her eyes locked on Evan, then drifted to the doctor's injuries. "What the hell happened in here?" Genta answered first, voice tight. "The blood. It's corrosive. Dr. Akir made contact through gloves, but it burned straight through." Brooks looked at Evan, now half conscious, and moaning something about not skipping dessert next time. Then she looked back at Akir's hands, already bandaged in a cooling agent wrap. "Is he contagious?" Akir shook his head, then regretted the motion. "We don't know. It appeared normal until the compress was removed. Then it reacted violently, smoked, burned my gloves. I can't rule out systemic toxicity or weaponization." Brooks muttered something in English, then turned to the wall panel. "We need full bioscans, lab analysis, check every contaminant, every molecule, and test that field dressing. I want to know if we're dealing with some hidden augment or a bioengineered toxin." The AI chimed back. "Initial scans of the air composition show elevated levels of acetic nitrates and sulfochem byproducts, unknown source. No matching profile found in the Galactic Med database." Akir leaned back against the wall, heart still racing. This wasn't just reactive, he said, this was designed to burn. Within 2 hours, the incident had made its way through the coalition science channels. Rumors bloomed like spores. Some believed humans had finally revealed their secret weapon, hemotoxic blood. Others whispered about biochemical evolution, survival traits embedded deep in their species' past. Meanwhile, Evan was stabilized and placed under observation. He'd been given mild sedatives and a saline drip, and muttered in his sleep about a missing dessert tray and something called nacho cheese vengeance. The real confusion came when the full bioscan came back. Dr. Trivex of the Ilior Research Academy led the team reviewing the data. He floated above the conference table, fins twitching in controlled motion. No abnormalities detected in Holt's blood composition. pH, viscosity, cellular structure, all standard. In fact, this is the most average human blood we've ever cataloged. Captain Brooks raised an eyebrow. You're saying what melted through the gloves and injured my doctor is just regular blood? Trivex hesitated. On its own, yes. But we found something else in the sample trace residues of a synthetic preservative compound. It was expelled through the bloodstream, likely through mucosal absorption in the digestive tract. We traced it to the contents of Holt's stomach. You're saying it was something he ate? Trivex pulsed slightly brighter. Exactly. A chemical preservative called luraxalin P, perfectly safe for human digestion. But when combined with latex-based polymer compounds, like those in the standard coalition medical gloves, it becomes violently reactive. Brooks pinched the bridge of her nose. Eats something, it seeps into his system. Then when we touch his blood with our gear, it turns into acid? Not acid, Trivex corrected. An unstable catalytic oxidizer, fast-acting but temporary. It's likely the effect had already begun breaking down by the time we ran tests. Akir stared down at his bandaged hands. The pain had dulled, but the burn marks would take weeks to heal fully. It wasn't the blood, it was our gloves. The room fell quiet. Gentha muttered, "We've been using that glove compound for 2 decades. Trivex nodded. And no known contact with luraxalin P until now. It appears the preservative is newly introduced to Earth military rations, only in certain menus. Brooks didn't laugh, but her mouth twitched. So the most dangerous thing in that man's bloodstream was lunch. Akir sighed. It wasn't lunch, it was a regulatory oversight. And that's when the real avalanche began. By the next planetary rotation, the Coalition Health Board was in emergency session. Every latex-based medical glove in use across human-alien deployments was flagged for immediate reevaluation. Earth's Defense Nutrition Logistics Agency was contacted, their field ration database pulled apart, ingredient by ingredient. And somewhere in a sterile, orbiting kitchen lab, a chef in uniform named Greg Simmons was being screamed at by 3 different interspecies food auditors who wanted to know why menu item 14C contained luraxalin P and why its interaction with latex had never been tested. But back on Ardent Mercy, Sergeant Evan Holt awoke to a headache, an empty stomach, and the vague memory of someone screaming. His leg was stiff, his thigh wrapped in sterile bandage. The wound had been cleaned, the muscle stitched carefully. He'd need crutches for several weeks, and full healing would take 3 months with physical therapy. There would be no walking unaided for at least 4 weeks. He tried to sit up. A gentle hand stopped him. Akir stood at his bedside, fingers still bandaged but steadier now. "You are not to move until cleared," the doctor said. Evan blinked. "Hey, Doc, you okay?" "I'm recovering, slowly." Evan frowned. "Did something happen?" Akir studied him. "You bled, that is all." Evan chuckled, then winced. "Well, yeah, that's what we do when we get holes in us." Akir didn't laugh. He merely placed a new nitrile glove on the tray and muttered, "Noted." Evan was still not cleared to leave the medical bay 3 days later, though the worst of the bleeding had stopped within the first 12 hours. The regenerative mesh Akir applied to his thigh was performing admirably, though even with advanced care, full muscle function wouldn't return for another 10 to 12 weeks. Walking unaided? At least a month away. He was mostly bored. The boredom itched worse than the sutures. He spent his days propped up in bed watching galactic news feeds, listening to the faint buzz of scanning equipment and answering the same question over and over from concerned visitors. What was in that ration? "I don't know, man," Evan grunted on the fourth time a curious engineer asked. "It was chili mac. It tasted like foot, like all field rations do." Akir, ever composed despite the thick medicated salve still coating his recovering palms, passed by his bed with a scan tablet. "Your dietary logs were reviewed," he said without pausing. "Menu item 14C contained a compound not present in your prior meals. Synthetic preservative, mild in flavor, potent in consequence." Evan frowned. "They scanned my food? Without asking?" "You were unconscious. Consent was assumed under emergency analysis, also it was melting gloves." "Right. That." Outside the med bay, chaos moved in bureaucratic spirals. Entire shipments of human field rations were pulled from stations across coalition space. The Defense Nutrition Logistics Agency had released a formal statement admitting the preservative was introduced recently due to increased shelf life requirements in hostile climates. They hadn't considered interspecies biochemical interaction. No one had, but the public certainly was now. On the third day, a science team arrived to observe Evan. 12 researchers in 3 shifts. They hovered around his bed, with scanning rigs, portable analyzers, and clipboards made of transparent resin. Some asked detailed questions. Others just stared at him like he might sprout corrosive fangs at any moment. Evan tolerated them until the 5th hour. "Okay," he said, sitting upright as best he could. "Let's be clear. I didn't choose to melt your gloves. I was just hungry." One of the researchers, a soft-spoken Avanari biochemist named Rezel, tapped the tablet nervously. "You did ingest a foreign compound. It entered your bloodstream within 28 minutes, reached full systemic circulation in 43. "It's not foreign to us," Evan pointed out. "That preservative has been cleared by human food authorities for 15 years. We eat that stuff like it's candy." "Humans eat many substances that would kill others," Rezel muttered. That earned a dry chuckle from Evan. "You're not wrong." That night, Akir stayed late in the medbay. Not because he had to his hands, while still bandaged, no longer needed constant monitoring, but because he found himself unsettled. He ran a full diagnostic again on the original compress and blood sample, this time with enhanced spectrographic tools. He traced every molecular reaction, every bond that snapped under the chemical strain. He simulated the reaction in a virtual environment. And he watched again and again as a compound perfectly harmless in humans caused blistering, smoke-generating combustion when it came into contact with his species' gloves. It wasn't the human, it wasn't even the blood, it was ignorance. "We were lucky," he murmured to himself. "If it had been in surgery, if it reached the bloodstream of a different patient." A quiet voice startled him. "I heard you got burned pretty bad." It was Evan, hobbling forward with a single crutch and a medical clearance slip crumpled in his other hand. Akir turned slowly. "I am recovering. You shouldn't be on shift." "Be not merely concluding data review?" Evan limped closer. "I just got cleared for light activity. They said I'm not allowed on stairwells, which is dumb because this ship doesn't even have stairs. You should still rest." "I've rested. I've watched 12 hours of alien cooking shows and 2 public hearings about a Chilimax scandal. That's enough." Akir exhaled. "Then perhaps you can help clarify something." Evan nodded. "Shoot." He pulled up a projection of the ration's ingredient list. "Laraxolin P, this compound. Do you understand why your military would include it in field meals?" Evan leaned closer, squinting. "Ooh, that. Yeah, I remember a nutrition guy saying they added that to stop the noodles from turning gray in extreme temperatures. Keeps them chewy. Something about water retention and cross-linking agents." "Cross-linking agents?" Akir repeated, writing the term down. I think they thought it was more important that the food look edible, you know? Akir looked up. Even if it isn't? Evan shrugged. Soldiers will eat anything if it's warm and doesn't scream back. Akir studied him carefully. Your species' approach to nutrition is borderline reckless. Probably. We once deep-fried butter. Akir blinked. Why? Because someone dared us to. The doctor closed the display, but the tension lingered. This will not go away quietly. Nope, Evan agreed. Word is the coalition's about to issue a recall notice on half of Earth's exported foodstuffs. There's even a culinary regulation board being formed. Akir nodded slowly. That is wise. Evan turned to leave but paused at the door. Hey, I didn't get to say this before. I'm sorry you got hurt. Akir's expression softened. You did not intend it. Still, that's gotta suck. I did. There was a moment of silence. Then, Evan smiled weakly. Next time, I'll just stick to the oatmeal. Ensure it contains no surprise oxidizers. As Evan limped out, Aki stared again at the glove compound still stored in the corner. 3 crates of them, standard issue, and suddenly every procedure he'd done for years felt like it had been teetering over the edge of disaster. He sent a request to Procurement Command that night. Immediate glove replacement. Nitrile only, no latex variants. He also added a second request. A cross-species dietary compatibility warning system to be installed in all food processors and field ration kits. It was flagged urgent within the hour. The next day, a minor conference was convened aboard Ardent Mercy. Coalition delegates and Earth nutrition officers, along with biohazard experts, diplomats, and one flustered chef. Akir was invited to present his findings. He spoke plainly. This was not a biological threat. This was a regulatory gap. We share ships, we share tools, but we do not yet share knowledge. That must change. No one argued. By the time the conference ended, a dozen new safety standards were proposed. 3 were enacted within the week. Evan watched the proceedings from the medbay, sipping lukewarm broth. Didn't think I'd end up in the middle of a galactic food recall, he muttered. Gentha, walking past, raised an eyebrow. You humans always end up in the middle of something. He grinned. That's because we're excellent at making messes and stories. Try fewer messes next time. No promises. By the 6th day, the wound in Evan's thigh had sealed enough to reduce the dressing size. He was still using a crutch for balance, and full weight-bearing was a week off at minimum. But he moved through the corridors now with grudging approval from medical. The rest of the ship seemed to have recovered from the initial panic. He hadn't. Not fully. Because despite everyone calling it the glove incident or ration gate, Evan couldn't shake the memory of Akir screaming. Not in rage, in pain. The kind that came with melting nerves and ruined hands. And Evan had been the trigger. Not by intention, but still. Akir didn't bring it up again. Professional as always, he simply updated his charts, checked the wound regeneration logs, and instructed Evan to resume the strengthening exercises for his hip flexors. But every time Evan looked at those healing hands, knuckles pink and raw, skin still stretched too tight over slowly recovering tissue, guilt prickled in his gut. That evening, Evan asked a favor from one of the junior engineers. By next midday, he had a crate delivered to Medbay 7. Akir found it waiting in his office, unmarked except for a single word scrawled in large, clumsy penmanship. Peace. Inside were 3 boxes of nitrile gloves, a bottle of human-grade skin salve, and a handwritten note. I didn't know what else to get, not much available on a military vessel, but if you're still mad, I also sent chocolate. Warning, it's edible only to humans and some Canary. Evan. Akir read the note twice, then again. He didn't smile, but he placed the salve into the supply cabinet and kept the note folded neatly in his drawer. The chocolate he gave to Gentha. She stared at the small brown squares, sniffed them cautiously, and asked, "How do humans find these appealing?" "They taste sweet," Akia replied. She nibbled a piece and made a face. Like soil, with ambition. Ardent Mercy docked at Station Valen 3 2 days later for its routine supply rotation. Normally a forgettable stop, the docking sparked a media flare. A coalition medical advisor had leaked early notes from the investigation into the glove incident, and words like biohazard, potential species-wide incompatibility, and ingestion-based chemical risk were splashed across 10 languages. Evan was barely off crutches when a reporter cornered him in the cafeteria. Staff Sergeant Holt, did you know your blood could injure aliens before this incident? He froze mid-bite of oatmeal. No, definitely not. Do you feel responsible for the glove damage? Yes, kind of, but also no. Can I finish breakfast? The footage ran on 4 networks that evening. Back in Med Bay, Akir watched the replay in silence, his bandaged hands folded neatly on his lap. Are you considering pressing charges? Gentha asked. Akir blinked. Charges? For what? For the injury. Or gross negligence. Some might argue he should have known the contents of his rations. He is not a xenobiologist, Akir replied. He is a soldier who consumed an approved field meal, one designed by his species, cleared by his authorities. Still, his blood is normal. Yenta didn't respond. Akir's hands had begun to peel in patches. The outer dermal layer was flaking off painfully, but that meant progress. It would be 3 more weeks before he could handle surgical tools again, but he had resumed diagnostics with voice assistants and light touch interfaces. On the 12th day, the Coalition's Culinary Compliance Bureau published its initial report. It was grim. Over 320 substances currently used in human packaged meals showed at least moderate reactivity with common materials in Coalition equipment. Most of them were harmless to humans, some even necessary for long-term preservation or metabolic stabilization under variable gravity. But to alien physiology and materials, many were chemical grenades waiting for the right contact. The worst part? None of it had been malicious. Not sabotage, not testing, just incompatibility born from oversight. The Bureau's conclusion was clear. Cross-species food distribution must include intermaterial reactivity certification. No ration or consumable may be deployed in shared environments without updated compatibility clearance. Evan read the summary aloud to Akir the next time he was in for therapy. We're officially the first medical case cited in a galaxy-wide food regulation law. Your legacy is cemented. Evan gave a lopsided grin. Yeah, just what I dreamed of. He was able to walk now, slowly, without the crutch for short distances. The muscle had begun to respond better with daily sessions, though Akir still insisted on measured steps and stretch intervals. How are the hands? Evan asked. Functional again, Akir replied, flexing one hand in demonstration. The motion was stiff but complete. Glad to hear it. I brought something else. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a rectangular device. It's a translator patch, update, special settings. It flags known incompatible terms and cross-species caution items in real time. My cousin wrote the base code. He does logistics. Akir studied it. Run silently, Evan continued. If a human says something like cinnamon toast, the patch immediately pulls its chemical profile and flags any compounds likely to cause problems for local equipment or biology. Preemptive warning? Yup. Figured it could help with shared kitchens, med storage, cafeterias, anywhere people might be eating or bleeding. Akir accepted the device, weighing it in his good hand. Thank you. No more glove meltdowns on your watch. Preferably not. The following week, Ardent Mercy received a full inventory shipment. Among the pallets were crates of newly certified gloves, color-coded by material base and species compatibility. Each pair came with a QR tag linking to the updated chemical reactivity database. Also among the deliveries was a small unofficial package. Inside was a t-shirt, black cotton, printed across the front in bold white text. I bled on an alien, and all I got was this regulatory nightmare. Evan wore it the next day to physical therapy. Akir stared at it for 5 full seconds, then said, "Remove it, it is not sterile." Evan peeled it off, grinning. "You didn't say it wasn't funny." That too. 2 weeks after the incident, Evan passed his first unaided mobility test. The data chart showed improved balance, stable stride, and full range of motion in the right hip flexors. His quad strength was only at 65% baseline. But that was expected. Realistically, it would take another 6 weeks to reach pre-injury mobility. 8 if he skipped therapy. Which he wouldn't. He still wore a compression wrap under his uniform pants. The scarring would fade, but not entirely. He didn't mind. Akir had returned to full duty 3 days earlier. His skin had regrown with the help of regenerative tissue stimulants, and the gloves he now wore, thicker, teal-colored nitrile with a high-visibility coating, were labeled multi-species certified and came in sealed individual packets. He unwrapped a new pair before each procedure, and he never used the old ones again. Today was quiet. Evan had his last in-ship therapy session at 1400, followed by a reassignment briefing. Until then, he loitered in the med bay corridor with a thermos of lukewarm coffee and a half-eaten protein bar. It tasted like chalk and almonds. "Are you cleared for active duty?" Akir asked as he passed. "Limited ops. They're moving me to security patrol on the civilian decks. No combat zones for at least 3 months. You were able to actually..." "Not your call, Doc. Still good." Evan sipped the coffee. "You know, I was supposed to transfer out before all this happened. Was going to rotate back to Earth for training, recruitment duty, teach some rookies how not to walk through explosions." Akir folded his hands. "Why did you stay?" "They froze all transfers after the incident. Said they needed all medical and military assets nearby in case things escalated. But they didn't." Evan nodded. "Because we caught it early." They stood in silence for a moment. "You know," Evan added, "back on Earth there's a myth about our blood being acidic, like horror movie acidic. Melts through metal and stuff. Is it true?" He held up a bandaged knuckle. "Only if I've eaten chili mac." Akir gave the closest approximation of a chuckle his physiology allowed. It was short, low in frequency, and barely audible but genuine. A technician stepped into the corridor. "Dr. Akir, you're needed in OR 2. They want you to consult on the Vorth cranial swelling." Akir nodded and moved to follow, then paused. He turned to Evan. "Staff Sergeant, would you like to observe? There is no bleeding expected." Evan blinked. "Seriously? Your incident triggered sweeping changes. You may as well witness the ripple effects. And I have found your questions useful." Evan considered it. "As long as I don't have to scrub in." "No. Only watch. From a safe distance, with proper gear. Then I'm in." The operating theater was quiet except for the soft hum of the instruments and the occasional beep of a vital monitor. The Vorth patient lay on the table, his translucent skull dome illuminated by internal lights. It looked like a crystal orb filled with drifting mist. Evan stood behind the observation pane, wearing a disposable cap and an oversized sterile poncho. He looked more like a bundled tourist than an observer, but he watched intently. Akir moved with deliberate precision. No hesitation, no tremor. The gloves he wore were thick, but didn't hinder him. He navigated the procedure with ease, applying subdermal mesh and fluid rebalancers like he was conducting a slow, quiet orchestra. Afterward, as the patient was wheeled out, Akir returned to the observation room and removed his gloves. They hissed softly as the seal broke. "No burns," Evan said. "Correct. And no chili mac anywhere in the room." "Also correct." They sat together in the adjacent debrief chamber. It was just a bench and a screen for surgical reviews, but it was the closest thing to quiet Evan had found all week. "I didn't think this would blow up so much," he said. "It did not blow up," Akir corrected. "It ignited." Evan laughed. "You humans eat dangerous food," Akir added. We do dangerous things in general. Food should not be one of them. Tell that to the guy who invented deep-fried ice cream. Akir paused. That sounds structurally contradictory. It is. And somehow it still works. A moment passed before Evan looked over, more serious now. Do you think there'll be long-term effects from all this? Policy changes are one thing, but did this incident change how humans and aliens see each other? Akir didn't answer right away. Then he said, perhaps. Not dramatically. But trust is fragile. Our cooperation relies on understanding. And this showed how easily we can overlook the simplest things. Not malice. Just misalignment. Evan nodded. But it also showed, Akir continued, that humans are quick to act, quick to repair, quick to apologize. Evan stared at the floor. Still feel like it shouldn't have happened. It did. But the wound healed, both yours and mine. They sat in silence again. A minute later, Evan stood up. Well, Doc, I'll be seeing less of you now. Kinda weird, huh? You are no longer my patient. Right, I'm just a guy who set off a galactic food recall with lunch. There are worse legacies. Evan extended a hand. Akir looked at it, then shook it bare-handed. No gloves. No reaction. No burns. Truskin. As they pulled apart, Akir said, do not eat anything unapproved before boarding shifts. Evan grinned. You got it. That evening, Akir returned to his office and placed the folded note back into the drawer. The translator patch Evan had given him now hung beside his workstation, integrated into the display system. It pinged automatically whenever new substances were logged from incoming human supplies. He looked at the gloves now, brightly labeled, color-coded, and safe. He looked at his hands, fully healed, unblemished. And he felt, for the first time in many cycles, not cautious, but calm. On the civilian deck, Evan passed a small child with canary feathers who pointed at his leg and whispered, "That's the human with fire blood." He didn't correct them. He just smiled and limped past.